you ever felt like you've changed, but people are still holding on to this really old, outdated version of you that just, doesn't really exist anymore? And maybe it never existed in the first place, but they have created this idea of you because of, who knows why. And the thing is that if a person knows of you or knows you directly, like they're gonna have a perception of you based on your relational history. And I would advise you to always, always, always start by reflecting over what version of you this person got to experience. Because maybe they've only seen you in a very specific context, maybe they've only seen certain sides of you, or maybe they have actually gotten to know the whole real you, but maybe not in present time. And the thing is that people from the past, they like to really, hang on to a version of you, even if we're all aware that, time passes and things might change. So all of this can be, of course, quite frustrating, especially when we ourselves, we've let go of something, but other people struggle to do the same. I want to actually go over with you why they struggle so much, because I really don't want you to take to heart when this happens and let it influence your life or dictate your life choices. I want to actually first talk to you about first impressions, because I think we all can agree that they can be quite important in many situations. Like, let's say you go on a blind date or job interview or something similar. And the reason why first impressions are so important is because there is something called anchoring bias. And so that happens in the very moment, like the very first moment when somebody receives the first ever piece of information about you or someone. And so that piece of information tends to anchor inside us, meaning that it tends to really stick. And it's actually quite hard to shift a person's impression of someone once it has anchored within that person, okay? So if a person, hangs on to this really old, outdated version of you, like, okay, I'm gonna give you an example. Let's say you were like me, a party girl in the past. And perhaps if someone met you at 5 a.m. in a nightclub, you're not gonna come across very serious at a first impression. And then in future meetings, this person might actually struggle of letting go of this perception of you in their head, because they might have gotten the impression that, Anna the party girl, she's not to be trusted, like she's not very serious. She just parties all the time. Even though perhaps you've stopped partying decades ago. But these first impressions, they just, linger there and anchors, and it can be quite challenging for people to update their perceptions, even if they are presented with new information that is completely different. And so this is very important to understand, that there are cognitive biases that happens inside the human brain. And these cognitive biases may have nothing to do with reality. Okay? Then there is something called confirmation bias. What that does is that it actually favors information that does confirm an existing belief of a person. Okay? So if I have a belief that I don't like somebody, confirmation bias inside my head is going to do that. I'm just going to focus on all the information that shows this person's flaws or this person's mistakes. And then my brain is simply going to be overlooking or rationalizing away any other information that is of positive nature, because it's just so focused, has like tunnel vision on the negative, because you already have a negative belief about that person. Okay. Then there is more. Then there is something called status quo bias, meaning that psychologically people actually have a preference for things to kind of remain the same. I know, because it feels safe, it feels comfortable, and the problem is that this kind of bias makes people generally really resistant to actually ever want to update their beliefs, because they just feel more comfortable with their initial thoughts because they feel familiar. So these are like the three main cognitive biases that really does play tricks inside the human's mind. And this is so important that you are aware of, because I don't want you to take to heart if someone has this perception of you. Don't think that that perception might be the reality. Then I think if we look at society as a whole, we all know that most people, they don't really care for, let's say, therapy or psychology or just educating themselves and become really self-aware about their own kind of cognitive biases and their own little issues. Because, to be able to correct this little mishap that happens here, you actually actively have to catch yourself in your own confirmation bias or in your own anchoring bias, and then tell yourself that, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I made a mistake in my belief about, let's say, somebody. And come on, how many of us feel good about ourselves when we tell ourselves that we were wrong? Not many, so we tend to kind of avoid doing that, right? Unless we're really honest with ourselves. Plus, a lot of us are also quite lazy. We might not be interested in, seeking out new information. Some people are just quite closed off as individuals and lack the openness that is really needed to be able to shift a perspective of a person. All very depressing information that I've shared with you so far. I know, but listen, you have to be aware of this because only then can you actually understand how absurd the human mind can be sometimes and the thinking patterns. And this way, you're going to be able to fully detach from being so kind of emotionally attached to if somebody doesn't understand who you are today. You have to really understand how impossible it is to control what other people are thinking. I mean, I am all about leaving a positive first impression or have a balanced approach to refine your personal brand or communication. But in the end of the day, what's happening inside a person's mind is impossible to control. Which is why you have to detach yourself from any need to control. But does this mean now that we should just give up? Let people think whatever they want and not just give a damn about anything? Well, I think yes and no. I believe that this is a very complex question and there is a gray zone that we should enter. Because I don't believe in one extreme or the other. There is no black and white thinking on this channel, so make sure you subscribe. I do think there are situations when you actually have an opportunity in a natural way that is not self-compromising to communicate clearly about yourself. There is nothing wrong with sharing about yourself, your life, your thoughts, who you are today. We all do that every day without thinking about it. And I also don't believe that there should be anything wrong wanting to improve our verbal or non-verbal communication with other people. Of course, we should try to be, the best version of ourselves that we can be. But what is important is that it shouldn't go to an extreme, where you put so much emphasis on how you are being perceived. When you are simply changing yourself too much, just because you want to be liked. I hope you're following me and understand the difference. I believe that people can have good manners, be polite. Ultimately, that is about caring what other people think because you want to leave a good impression. You want to be nice to other people. But I'm talking about when people take it one step further, when it really just becomes obsessive, people's pleasing, and that kind of thing. What I'm also really trying to tell you is that I don't really like this expression, be yourself, because I think there's a lot of nuance to what that actually means. So I'm not going to give you that advice, but I am going to tell you that just focus on being authentically you. And that is the only thing you can do. You can just be yourself, okay? And then you're going to see that there are going to be people who are going to be like, oh, okay, well, yeah, she's changed, right? And then there are going to be people who'll be like, no, she hasn't changed, And the thing is that these people, they're going to react like that because they probably don't want you to change. They want to hold on to an old version of you because perhaps that version serves them better. And what I just said here is super important because there are a lot of people who actually falsely create a version of you because it serves them better. Like an example, let's say at work, you may become the scapegoat for your boss because he needs to have a punching bag. He needs to always put the blame on somebody and you're an easy target. And so he creates then this version of you that you're faulty, you're not doing your job right. And what becomes dangerous is that you might start believing that version of you, even though that version actually doesn't exist. People with a weak sense of self need to be very careful for this behavior. I want you to really put a filter on what you allow into your own space, your own energy field. Really do filter. Just because somebody says you are XYZ doesn't mean it's true. Always listen to your inner voice. Always know who you are. And don't take what people say as facts. You don't know their real intentions behind, and it can become really dangerous for you. Plus, these people might really hinder you from progressing. If somebody says, oh, there's a party girl Anna, and then you hold on to that image of yours, and then you allow that to pester your belief system to the point that you actually start taking decisions that supports that narrative, even though it's not true. Maybe you become afraid of applying for a job because you think like, oh my gosh, it's pointless. They're not going to hire me because of my party history. Imagine limiting yourself like that in life just because somebody has influenced your thinking about yourself. Their distorted thinking may have nothing to do with reality, and you need to be able to filter that out. What you should be doing is that you can just do the best you can, and then you have to let it go. And you know that everybody evolves, and if people cannot evolve their thinking, then maybe that has something more to do with them than it has to do with you. Before I let you go, just a little reminder to subscribe to this channel, and if you want more in-depth training from me, then simply go to levelupclass.com, because that is the platform where I offer my coaching services and where I can mentor you further. Now, in my next video about imposter syndrome, we're going to continue work on your belief system and not allowing it to hinder anymore anything you do in life. So hop on over to that video, because I will see you there.